Today on the MrMaple Show podcast, Tim and Sean count down the top 25 Japanese maples for beginners.
Howdy, and welcome to the MrMaple Show podcast. Y'all, we've got an awesome podcast for you today. We're bringing out Japanese maples for beginners, the top 25 Japanese maples for beginners. Y'all, I'm sitting here with Sean Richardson.
I'm excited for this one. This has been a topic that we seem to get questions a lot on social media. We get it in our office, coming in emails, a list of what, I'm a beginner. I have never had real experience with Japanese maples. What's a good one I can start with hardiness and all that type of stuff. So we decided, I came to you and Matt and said, hey, we get this a lot. Let's put together a list.
And Matt and I put together a list of the 25 hardiest Japanese maples. But then we didn't rank them by hardiness. What we ranked them by is utility, beauty, use. And so if you're a beginner, these are 25 hardy Japanese maples that you can grow, and we're going to rank them based on, the top 25 that you should be getting as a beginner.
So you want to go ahead and jump right in?
Yeah, we might as well. Now, coming to number 25, we've got Acer palmatum Sucasa Silhouette.
So Sucasa Silhouette, this one, I really like this one because of its upright and columnar nature. I talk a lot in videos and stuff with landscaping that your vertical interest in a garden, this is one that can give you that vertical interest in your landscape.
Yeah, and the thing with Sucasa Silhouette, give it sunlight. If you give it more shade, it will get a little more width to it, which is fine if that's what you're going for. But Sucasa Silhouette gets its name from having its narrow shape. It was a selection by Sucasa Maple in Japan. It was given the name Silhouette by Don Shadow, who also has a liquid ambar, a sweet gum called Slender Silhouette that's very popular in the industry. And he said, Sucasa Silhouette, that really fits because it's from Sucasa Maple and it's got that narrow shape like Slender Silhouette does. It fits in the landscape so well and adds that vertical interest. One of the things I like about Sucasa Silhouette, though, is its hardiness. It is very closely related to Acer palmatum subspecies palmatum, and the fact that it is very much, the leaf, the hardiness is almost as hardy as basically the rootstock, that what you'd find growing naturally in the wild, but that narrow shape makes it easy to use in almost any garden.
Yeah, and you're looking at a tree that's going to get, just about 6 to 7 foot wide by about 15 to 20 foot in 20 years.
Yeah, that's easy to use in the landscape. I have seen a lot of people using this as entranceways to gardens. It's an amazing tree to add that verticality, so it draws the eye across the entire landscape. If you've seen some of Sean's videos on landscaping using that vertical interest, you can sort of get that idea what you can do with Sucasa Silhouette. But what Sucasa Silhouette does is it gives you a beautiful tree, and it's an underrated fall color. The fiery red fall colors on Sucasa Silhouette make this an easy tree for any beginner.
Great tree. So now coming in at number 24, we've got Emerald Lace.
Yeah, Emerald Lace is perhaps one of the hardiest lace leaves of them all. For a weeping style, it can actually handle it's one of the most heat tolerant of any of the lace leaves. And partly of that is because it is an Acer palmatum subspecies palmatum, where most of the other lace leaves are subspecies Matsumuri. So the hardiness is off the charts for Emerald Lace. And it can handle some of the most hot climates in Florida that many other Japanese maples, especially the weeping varieties, wouldn't be able to handle.
I really like this one because of its dissected leaf. It really gives a really cool interest in the garden, just the leaf shape itself. And then also, this is one that's also known as to be a vigorous grower as well.
Yeah, and it is vigorous in its horizontal growth. And it has this horizontal to extremely weeping habit. Some people ponder if this could have been a dwarf mutation on the cultivar Seru because they share the same leaf. They share the same small seeds, unlike any of the other lace leaves, but we don't really know. It was found by David Sabo in Charlotte, North Carolina. And David Sabo took cuttings and mailed them to our friend Del Laux, who introduced so many amazing plants. And he introduced in the nursery trade, and it's went worldwide. And Emerald Lace, to me, it's a classic Japanese maple. It's hardy. It's easy to grow. It's a great container plant. I mean, when you're talking about a Japanese maple for a container plant, you're looking for something that's going to stay smaller in stature. And this can make a really graceful appearance with its horizontal weeping habit. It's a really awesome tree. And again, this also has that fire engine red fall color.
This is one that's going to get about 6 to 8 foot wide and only in the height about 3 to 4 foot tall in about 15 years.
Yeah, and with those lace leaves, you may find a tree that is grafted much higher, and so you can get a higher start on some of those. You can always stake them up to get them taller if you want as well. But that's typically with a low graft what you're typically going to get in that time frame. And Emerald Lace is just a rock star in the garden. To me, it's extremely hardy. It's beautiful. It has some of the most intricate foliage of any of those dissected Japanese maples. And if you're looking for a weeping tree, especially for a container plant, look no further than Emerald Lace.
And coming in at number 23, we have Hefners Red.
Yeah, this to me is one of the best red uprights. It can have a little different shape than many of the other red upright Japanese maples, but Hefner's Red is one of the red Japanese maples that holds its color very well all throughout the year, even in high heat.
This was a chance seedling from Hefner's Nursery, and you're looking at about 12 to 15 foot in 20 years. And this one is also a this is a good heat tolerant Japanese maple.
I remember going to the North Carolina Green and Growing shows and seeing Hefner's Nursery, and one of the guys there has these long handlebar mustaches. It's one of the biggest mustaches I've ever seen. So every time I see Hefner's Red, that's what I think about, is these huge, gigantic, really well manicured handlebar mustaches. But Hefner's Red, that tree, it's got a multi-stemmed approach to an upright Japanese maple, so it's not your typical street tree kind of fashion for a Japanese maple. It's got more of that traditional Japanese maple feel, but with that red color. I know Fred Hooks, he brought a lot of Japanese maples into the country, and really, he was the one that found Yukiyama and Snow Kitten. He was really pushing Hefner's Red. And I know when he told us about Baton Rouge and where it was down in Houston, around Houston, Texas, and Warren, Texas, he said, take your Hefner's Red down there with you as your trade bait, because down there in Texas in the high heat, they're going to want a red Japanese maple that holds its color as well as Hefner's Red does. And that was really good advice. We took down there and gave him Hefner's Red, walked away with some Baton Rouge and some other cultivars they had down there. And to me, Hefner's Red, awesome tree, not as common as some of the other red uprights, but that doesn't make it any worse of a tree. It's really amazing, and it really falls into a beginner's, one of their very first Japanese maples they should be getting.
Okay, so coming in at number 22, Seeing Kaku.
Yeah, Seeing Kaku. This tree was brought into the United States about 2008, and it was told to me as like, this is a more vigorous growing Makawa. And that's exactly what it is. It has that leaf structure, that tightly layering habit, slightly smaller leaves than Makawa Yetsubusa. But if you see a specimen of Seeing Kaku, and we've got a few of them now that have been in the ground since about 2008, you really start to see how it has the same structure as Makawa Yetsubusa, but it makes a larger tree. So it gives you a big presence out there in the garden.
Yeah, you're looking about 8 to 10 foot in 15 years. And what's really cool about this tree is this is one, you said 2008, but this one was actually in Japan and introduced in 1974. So it's one that's been around for a minute. And if you know anything about Japanese maples, if they've been around for a minute, you know that there's going to be a hardiness level to them.
Yeah, and Seeing Kaku, it's a classic Japanese maple it's become now because people see it in the landscape. And once you see a specimen of Seeing Kaku, it draws you in. And again, this is an excellent container plant. We're talking about container plants especially for beginner Japanese maple growers. Think about trees that stay on that smaller side or can be contained in a container very well. And Seeing Kaku can definitely do that. Make sure you've got good drainage for containers. And we've got whole podcasts just on container growing Japanese maples, lots of videos on our YouTube components. You can, if you're listening to us on our podcast, you can always check out the MrMaple Show on YouTube as well. We put a lot of how-tos out there for beginners to learn about Japanese maples. Seeing Kaku, it's an easy plant to grow. It's got a unique texture in the landscape with that small leaf, that tightly layering habit. It's a fun tree to add to the garden, to add a different dynamic that you don't get with many other Japanese maples.
And I also like that, the name, when I was, doing a little research, looking up, and it's known that the English translation is blue-green palace in the clouds. And that's just really cool.
Yeah, I mean, and you get some of that blue-green color on some of these Japanese maples if you give them a little more shade. We often look at that and we're like, huh. And, it's funny, too, talking to Ruko, because sometimes its colors are associated with emotions. And to the Japanese, blue and green are pretty much the same thing. Like pink and orange are close to the same thing. They're close to the same emotion. That's what it is with blue and green. So, I mean, it's really awesome seeing things like Seeing Kaku that was found in Japan, introduced in Japan, made its way to the United States, and is becoming popular in the nursery trade today.
So coming in at number 21, we've got Kamagata.
We've got an introduction by J.D. Vertrees himself, the guy who wrote the book on Japanese maples, and the complete cultivation guide. J.D. Vertrees was a pioneer, and he was in Oregon. He was a small nurseryman, and he wrote the book on Japanese maples. He had this huge collection. We've got a full tour of his home and gardens, and on our YouTube channel. You should go check that out for sure. J.D. Vertrees, he introduced about 5 or 6 different trees to the nursery trade. I have to really make a list to see everything that he introduced. But Kamagata is probably his most bulletproof tree that he introduced. And the books actually say that Kamagata means eagle claw. And if you talk to anybody who speaks Japanese, they're like, I don't know about that. Kamagata actually means the shape of a scythe, like a sickle. Like, people go out there and they're cutting grass. And the leaves on this just give that unique texture, serrated, deeply divided. I mean, that is one bulletproof plant.
It is, and it's also drought hardy. And you talk about those leaves that kind of have that drooping look to them. But this tree is also known for that fall color, that ruby red fall color that it gets.
When we realized how hardy Kamagata was, we were planting trees in my mom and dad's yard. And we had this area where I grew lots of hens and chickens because it was red clay. Not much would grow there. And we'd plant a Japanese maple back there. And the southwest exposure here in the south, hitting the red bricks of my parents' house, the radiating heat, not a lot of trees would thrive and do well back there. And we planted an Acer palmatum Kamagata, and that thing is a beast now. It's been beautiful. It's started to be able to, fill out now so that the brick doesn't radiate as much heat, so we can actually grow more plants back there as well. And it's just been bulletproof for me in so many regards. I said red clay, but you always got to make sure Japanese maples have good drainage in the ground as well. But Kamagata is one of those plants that is just outstanding, easy to grow. The leaves have a unique texture. It's slower growing. And we've got a gorgeous, huge specimen of this at the Buckholtz farm. And it's one of the biggest Kamagatas I've ever seen. It's rare that they get as big as the one that's out at the Flora Wonder Arboretum at Buckholtz's farm. But Kamagata is just such an amazing plant. It's often also used for bonsai. Like J.D. Vertrees said, it roots well, which is a unique characteristic. And it's one that can be very popular for bonsai because of that unique leaf structure and dwarf habit.
So now coming in at number 20, Red Dragon.
Now this plant's got a fun story, and it's often claimed that this tree came from New Zealand or Canada. But this is a selection by Red Maple Nurseries, Dick Wolf, the same guy who introduced Emperor One. And he found this as a chance seedling, put the name Red Dragon on it. It got to Canada and then escaped from there. And some other people actually get some credit for it. But Red Dragon is a red, smaller growing lace leaf, one of the slower growing lace leaves that can handle the sun. And it gets some orange-red backside to the leaves. And when the wind blows, it looks even brighter. I mean, you can see this on some of our YouTube channel videos when we highlight Red Dragon. We talk about this at Hillstone Arboretum. It is an amazing, smaller growing red Japanese maple that just holds its color extremely well with that lace leaf habit. It's easy to grow, and it's a tree that beginners, if you're looking for a tree, people often start with a tree that's got a name they can say. And Red Dragon is one of those trees that you can say, you can enjoy, and really enjoy that red color.
Yeah, Red Dragon, it's only going to get about 4 to 5 foot in 10 years, so it's definitely one that fits that dwarf category. And this one does great. It's one of my first ones that I got, and I have it in a container. But what I really like about this one is it's not as pendulous as some of the other lace leaves that are out there. So having it in a container, how many people will come by and from a distance will say, "Oh, you've got a bonsai." And no, it's not a bonsai. It's just a dwarf. And it was one that I can keep on the patio that's shaded. Like you say, it holds its red longer than other reds do. But from a distance, just the shape, that looks like a bonsai. And it's just one of those, as a beginner, you can have it in that container and you know it's going to grow well.
I've got to warn you, though, Red Dragon is a gateway drug. Dr. Kritikos, who we went and visited many times and shot his gardens and did many cultivar highlights at, he came to our nursery years ago, and he wanted 2 Red Dragons for container plants at the front of his home. He wanted to put them in these blue pots. It's actually one of our photos on our website is a Red Dragon in a blue pot at Dr. Kritikos' home and garden. And, he came for that. And then when he saw our parents' front yard, he said, "I think I want more." And that's kind of what you start to do with some of these plants. You get a Red Dragon, you're like, "This is really nice. I really enjoy this. What else is out there in the maple world?" And that's why we're giving you this top 25 list of Japanese maples, because these are Japanese maple beginner plants that are easy to grow, beautiful, and I hope you can start going down this list, start collecting some of these, and really start to branch out.
So now going to number 19, we're talking about dragons. So number 19, we've got the green-blue dragon, Siryu.
Yeah, another one of those plants that if you give it a shade, get some of that blue-green color to it. It's such a bulletproof in the sun. It took us years to realize how it got that blue-green kind of name. But it's vigorous. It's one of the fastest growing Japanese maples. It is a lace leaf, but it's upright. I mean, there's not many of them that do that. It's very rare. And this thing is hardy, super hardy, and makes a beautiful specimen in the garden.
What I like about Siryu is this is one of those trees, since it isn't upright and it is vigorous, and a lot of different Japanese maples are understory trees that like shade. This is one that you can put out there to be that shade tree for your other Japanese maples and plants that require some dappled sun or shade.
Yeah, this is one of those lace leaves like emerald lace, which is pretty heat tolerant. I mean, you can put this in some sun situations in some hot climates, and it's going to thrive and do well. It typically is very vigorous when it does so, makes this really beautiful shape in the garden. In sunlight, it's going to be a lot denser. In shade, it's going to be a little bit more open. But this is a selection that came in, it was introduced by Wada Nursery in the 60s and came to the United States through the National Arboretum. And they actually today still have that tree that they got from Wada Nursery. And it became popular in the nursery trade through that. And it is such an amazing tree. I mean, when it comes to a Japanese maple that gives a soft, elegant feel for a larger tree, you get a lace leaf foliage, so unique texture, but a big specimen. And for that reason, this tree is beautiful and often falls in many people who've been growing Japanese maples for numerous years. Say you've been a collector for 25 years. It's often one of your favorite trees you talk about in the garden because it makes such a nice specimen in your yard.
Yeah, and so you're talking about the vigorous, and so you're looking at 12 to 14 inches a year on this tree. So you're talking about you're going to get something that's bigger out there. You're going to get something that's going to be about 10 to 12 foot by 20 to 20, between 20 to 22 foot tall.
Yeah, and I've seen some growths on this in excess of 18 to 20 inches of growth in a year. I mean, it can really jump out there some years, especially at an early age. Siryu to me is one of those plants that if you're looking to have a large tree in the garden and you've got some sunlight, this tree will make a beautiful tree really quickly. But remember, this is going to be a tree. This is going to make a specimen. This is going to make a statement in your yard. Give it some space so it can really get its full form, real shape, and you can really enjoy the graceful habit of Seiryu.
Okay, so going on to number 18, the bonsais will like this. This is Kohime.
Now, Kohime is one of those low, flat-growing Japanese maples. We often call them toadstools, and it stays short and gets some nice width to it with a nice horizontal habit. But overall, it makes this almost ball-like shape on the ground. And in the springtime, you get a purple-red border around each and every leaf. But if we're talking about container plants, this is one of the most popular Japanese maples for containers that I can think of. We used to put Kohimes in 3 gallons for our garden shows because everybody would see them in the spring and they would jump on them to put them in containers in their yard. It fills out quickly, makes a nice little dense ball, and puts on a spring show that's second to none.
Yeah, you're looking to about 2 to 3 foot in height to about 6 to 7 foot width in 10 years. And this is one of those that I think that when it comes to landscaping can really be utilized. You can almost use this as hedges instead of, a boxwood or something like that. You could line this and then you're going to get that fall color and that fall show, that symphony out of your hedge instead of just your typical normal green to a yellow and then falls off and you really don't get anything.
Yeah, I think we actually saw something similar to this at Sarah P. Duke Gardens at our walkthrough. They use this as a unique hedge or a plant very similar to Kohime. And it is such a interesting plant to use. One of my favorite uses for this plant, people always take a Japanese maple or a plant and they like to plant them near their front of their house where they have their windows. Well, Kohime is an excellent tree to do that with because it never gets a lot of height to it and it gets some nice width. And by doing that, you can enjoy the Japanese maple, but plant something that's not obstructing your views from your window. And so the usefulness, the utility on Kohime is off the charts. But this is also a plant that's extremely heat tolerant. I mean, Kohime and some of the similar types like Murasaki Kohime are some of the plants that people in the deep south continue to praise for how hardy it is and how easy it is to grow.
So coming in at number 17, we have Rusin.
This is a selection by Kobayashi Momiji-en, and it's one of their more recent introductions in Japan. Matt and I had the honor and privilege of being able to visit their nursery multiple times, and I would consider them friends of MrMaple for sure. Rusin has a strong weeping habit, one of the most weeping habits of any of the Japanese maples. That makes it easy to shape, to train. The utility on this tree is off the charts because you can stake it up to 6 foot, have this fountain-like habit of it just drooping straight down, which is really beautiful. You can grow this tree in a hanging basket, let it just cascade off of the hanging basket. You can grow this tree as a topsy-turvy, going from underneath the basket, as Kobayashi Momiji-en does in Japan, and just let it go straight down, and then later, someday down in the future, flip it over, and you've got a tree that's been staked up essentially on all of its branches. I mean, there's so many fun ways to grow this tree. They even grew it as trellises over trellises at Kobayashi Momiji-en. So, I mean, it's a fun tree because you know what it's going to do. It's going to cascade straight downward. If you don't stake it up, it can be a ground cover. To me, for fun habit, this tree is one of the ones that's one of the best because you can really get creative with its unique shape.
Yeah, this one, known as Dragon Spirit, I always go back to Cindy Bowles that what we saw in her Texas garden. So we're talking Texas, y'all. Texas. So you know the growing conditions there. It gets hot and the humidity. So they're growing this in Texas. And I always think of Cindy Bowles, that thing, the way she has it staked up and the way it droops and fills out. It looks like a green cousin from the Addams Family. Just a killer tree that, like you say, you could just do so much with.
Now, one of the most impressive and most unique things about Rusin is while it has that weeping habit, it has a palmate leaf So it's not dissected like many of the lace leaves that have a weeping habit. I mean, Seiryu is the lace leaf that has an upright habit. Ryusin is that palmate leaf that has that strongly weeping habit. And because of that, it gives a unique texture for a weeping tree in the garden. Soft and elegant, full and dense, and it is extremely vigorous, hardy, and very easy to grow. For me, this is a collector plant, but it's also a plant for a beginner because it is very easy to grow in the garden.
Okay, so we're getting through the list. Coming in at number 16, Abish Shadari.
For a beginner, Abish Shadari is an amazing weeping red lace leaf Japanese maple to grow in your garden. It was one of the very first Japanese maples that we had here at Mr. Maple that was a red lace leaf. We enjoyed the tree because it was heat tolerant. So a lot of our customers down in Columbia, South Carolina, which is pretty darn hot, could grow it in full sun. It was vigorous. So it got out there and made a specimen, a decent sized specimen for a weeping red lace leaf fairly quickly. And it has a really good fall color.
So you're looking at only about 5 to 6 foot wide in 10 years. What I really like about this one, you say a red lace leaf, but this one almost at a certain point in the season, to me, I don't know if I could use red. I'd almost say a purple color in your landscape.
Yeah, I think you can really see that on one of our Cultivar highlights on an Abish Shadari where Matt's daughter introduces it. If you've seen the one where she says, today we're going to talk about Anobi Shadobi. And she's trying to say an Abish Shadari, and it's quite hilarious. But you can actually see an Abish Shadari in that purple red kind of color. And you're like, wow, that's captivating. That grabs my attention. And that's what an Abish Shadari can definitely do in the garden. It does green up a little bit in the summer, but you often got to remember, if you get that chlorophyll in the leaves, which is that green, during the summer months, you often get a very consistent fall color. And because of that, you get an amazing fall color on an Abish Shadari. To me, it's a win. It's easy to grow. And if you're looking for a red lace leaf for a beginner, it's easy to go with an Abish Shadari because it's a little bigger than that red dragon we mentioned earlier, but it's a great container plant, but it's extremely, extremely hardy.
And it's one of those, so you want to give it about at least 3 to 4 hours of sun in the morning to help bring out that red color in it and hold that color.
Now, Inaba is a surname in Japan. Shadari means weeping. So this is a weeping red lace leaf that's an older selection that was named after somebody in Japan. And to me, Abish Shadari is one of those plants that's a classic, but to me, it's proven. I mean, it's been out there. It's in people's gardens all across America, all across the world, and it's easy for people to grow. It can handle colder climates, can handle hotter climates. Some of my friends who have huge, huge operations, they swear by an Abish Shadari because it can get out there quickly and make a good specimen. So if they're looking for a specimen red lace leaf that's going to be beautiful for them to be able to sell to somebody and have immediate impact, an Abish Shadari does that. That means it can make an immediate impact in your garden as well. As a weeping red lace leaf, it's an easy tree for beginners to get into because often their first tree is a red weeping lace leaf. And an Abish Shadari, awesome plant.
So now we're going into number 15, a Talon Buckles introduction, Amber Ghost.
Oh, we're getting to some real interesting ones here.
We are.
Now, this is not just a tree that's easy to grow. This tree is probably the most heat tolerant of the Ghost series, but it has a strong upright habit, and it has what we call a reticulated variegation. So you see the veins of the leaf are one color while the rest of the leaf is another color. And with Amber Ghost, you get a darker color on the veins and an amber pastel across the new growth, across those leaves. The spring color is just really nice ambers. And this tree continues to put on shows all throughout the summer. And the fall color is a bright orange red. To me, this is an amazing tree in the garden that's heat tolerant. It gives you a unique look in the garden. And it's easy to grow. I mean, for a beginner who wants to have something a little more on that collector side, Amber Ghost is an awesome tree.
Absolutely. And you're looking at about 8 to 10 foot in 15 years. And Amber Ghost is really known where it really gets those colors is during that midsummer where that amber color really comes out, and that's where it gets its name from.
Yeah, Amber Ghost. All the Ghost series are named after different things. There's Purple Ghost, which is named after color. There's First Ghost, which was the very first one that was introduced. Sister Ghost, Grandma Ghost, Uncle and Baby Ghost. I mean, to me, Amber Ghost, it's one of my favorites from that series. And if you're looking for something that can make a strong if you're looking for a statement specimen in your garden that's an upright tree, this one just gives you a unique style of variegation with that reticulation that we're talking about. That's what we call Ghost, because it kind of looks a little eerie. But also, it's one of those trees that's just beautiful all throughout the season. Always changing, always giving you something different each and every part of the season. Amber Ghost is a rock star, coming in at number 15 for Japanese maples for beginners.
Okay, so coming in at number 14, Osaka Zuki.
One of the best fall color Japanese maples. It's a green, upright aminum. It's got a large leaf. And, you know, in Tsukiya Living magazine, which Matt and I have subscribed to for years, we have tons of them around here at the nursery. They often talk about, in a traditional Japanese garden, which is true if you go visit Japan, they love the green Japanese maples because they give a lively, summery feel to the garden. But then when fall hits, there's a switch. And you see fall, the changes of the seasons. You see a dynamic contrast to the spring, summer lively feel. With Osaka Zuki, it gives you a bold orange red, extremely bright. And it's often when that will go maroon for about a week and then will light up. And when it lights up, it's one of the best fall colors of any Japanese maple.
Yeah, this is the one that everyone is comparing every other red fall color to. This is what everything will get compared to. Looking at what does Osaka Zuki, it's a large drinking glass from Japan. So that's where it gets its name. I'm not sure exactly how that translates to a tree, but that's where it's named. It's a large drinking glass. But like you say, it gives you a really good upright feature in the landscape as well.
Well, we actually asked one of the translators in Japan about this when Matt and I were in Japan. Matt said, hey, Osaka Zuki, does that have anything to do with Osaka? Because we were traveling through Osaka. And he said, no, Osaka Zuki is a drinking glass that is a bright orange-red color, always. And because of that color, when someone is from Japan or hears the name Osaka Zuki, they know the fall color it's going to turn to, because it is a picture of the fall color from that drinking glass. So pretty cool there. Pretty cool with Osaka Zuki. And to me, this is a hardy tree. So one thing that we did with this list is we said we're excluding everything that's not zones 5 through 9, because this is Japanese maples for beginners. And so we didn't include some plants like Hot Blonde, which we currently have listed as 6 through 9. They're still trialing it in zone 5. We didn't list any coral barks in this because those are zone 6 through 9 for really, making it easy for beginners to grow. So there's a lot of things that were excluded from this list, but of the trees that are on this list that are zones 5 through 9, Osaka Zuki, the best fall color hands down. I mean, it's hard to beat Osaka Zuki when it lights up in the fall. It's fairly consistent. It's dynamic. And if you have Osaka Zukis in your garden and you've got specimens, it's going to be one of those trees that people drive by and they're going to be parking in your yard trying to take their prom photos. They're trying to take their photos and dresses in front of your tree in their fall, because it is just an amazing tree. So if you're planting some Osaka Zukis and you don't want people in your yard, you better put up some fences.
Absolutely. So talking about fall color, we go to another one that is just a killer fall color. Number 13, Acer japonicum, Emmett's Pumpkin.
Yeah, we included this on our list because it is the most vigorous and one of the hardiest of the Acer japonicum selections, those large full moon Japanese maples. Emmett's Pumpkin has a large green leaf that is extremely large, and it turns to a pumpkin orange in the fall, where it gets its name of Emmett's Pumpkin. Emmett's grandmother actually met Matt at one of the garden shows, and originally, Emmett's Pumpkin, she had a dollar, kind of like royalty, that people would pay on Emmett's pumpkin, and that's how she started to put Emmett through college. Oh, it wasn't cool. A patented tree or anything at the time, but it was just kind of like a gentleman's agreement with the people when she'd found this tree, and she helped put that towards his college fund. I'm not saying it paid for his entire college, but that's where Emmett comes in, and it is just a really cool and unique Japanese maple, and it's probably the most vigorous of any of the Acer japonicums.
Yeah, you're looking about 12 to 15 foot in 20 years. But again, back to that fall color, this is going to be one that this is where it shows off, is during its fall color. And you said those oranges, but I've been out there and I've seen them be red and orange at the same time, where you got different colors on different leaves at the exact same time.
And Emmett's pumpkin, when I say large, we're talking plate-sized leaves. We're talking really thick foliage, very round. And Emmett's pumpkin, because it has those large leaves and is vigorous, it can give a very unique texture in the landscape, but it gives this tropical-like feel because you see something that doesn't seem real, doesn't seem like it belongs here in North America. And, the japonicums grow natural in Japan. We saw plenty of Acer japonicums just growing in the wild, which was amazing, especially around Nikko Park. But when you see an Acer japonicum in the landscape, you're drawn to it. You're like, what's this? And everything's bigger on the japonicums. Those leaves are big, but in the springtime, you also have red tassel flowers. And most Japanese maples have these, but on the japonicums, they're bigger. And because they're this red color, they show up really well on a Japanese maple that has these large green leaves. So it gives this additional kind of spring interest that you don't get out of other Japanese maples because everything's bigger. And when you have that big leaf to display that fall color on, sometimes bigger is better.
So coming in at number 12, Gisha Gone Wild.
Geisha Gone Wild is another Talon Buckholz introduction. There's a similar cultivar out there called Shiraz. Both were found as sports on the cultivar Geisha in two different locations. Geisha is this slow-growing pink Japanese maple, and it has this little, swirl in the leaf sometimes with a darker red color. Geisha Gone Wild was found in Oregon on the cultivar Geisha, while Shiraz was found, also known as Gwen's Rose Delight, was found in New Zealand as a sport on the cultivar Geisha. So it's a reoccurring sport. They're almost identical. There's slight differences. But Geisha Gone Wild gives you that pink color that everyone loves, but in a more upright and hardy form. And for a pink on red Japanese maple, this has been a tree that's been able to handle full sun for us here in Western North Carolina. Makes a good upright tree. It's easy to use, but it's really beautiful with that pink on red color.
Now, this is one, if you do have it in shade, that if you give it, some morning sun, it'll hold its red longer and better. And you're looking about 7 foot in about 10 years. But so my personal experience with this tree is that a good friend of mine in Memphis, they're in the Mississippi Delta in the hot, humid summers, gifted one to him, and it is thriving. It is happy. And this is one that you could put in as a showstopper. You can put it as a centerpiece in your garden because it's one that can hold that status as a centerpiece. People will drive down and slow down just to look at this pink, purple, like you say, swirled, the colors in this tree. It's a showstopper. It's one that could really be your centerpiece in your garden.
Yeah, in the springtime and the fall, you get pink colors that are unreal. You can see a tree that's pink from a distance as a tree form in that springtime, and in the fall you get a pink-red color. It is outrageous during those times. One of my favorite times to photograph it, though, not as a tree but as the individual leaves, is that late spring to early summer when you have pink tipping where it's starting to turn to cream on green instead of where the red's turning to that green. You get this multi-color effect that's just really fun to go out there and photograph in that late spring. time. But as an overall tree, the spring and the fall are some of the most spectacular times because you really can get a pink tree out there in the garden. And pink, it's just a fun tree to see because it seems unreal. It seems like a tree that's been photoshopped. And this is one of my wife's favorite trees. We did a cultivar highlight on this at Hillstone Arboretum, and she's like, Tim, can I introduce that one? And I was like, yes, of course. Because it is just such a beautiful specimen. Geisha going wild, an easy tree for collectors to grow, an easy tree for beginners to grow, and it's going to make a statement that stands out and makes your yard different than your neighbors.
So we're going from your wife's favorite to possibly your favorite at number 11, Summer Gold.
Now, I wouldn't necessarily say that Summer Gold is my favorite tree, but it is my favorite tree to pair other Japanese maples with. And the yellow color on Summer Gold brings out all the other colors in the garden. It makes you see every shade of green. It contrasts well against the reds. It contrasts well against, some of those purple colors. You put it out in the garden and it brings the whole yard together. And that's what Summer Gold can do. And that's one of the reasons why we've got it here at number 11, because if you're looking to landscape your yard and you don't have a Summer Gold, you need to put a Summer Gold in. It can handle more sun than most of the other uprights. I mean, Hot Blonde can probably beat it on its sun tolerance, but Summer Gold comes in second at being one of the most heat tolerant yellows for your garden. It may show a little bit of burn when it's first getting established, but once it's established, it is easy to grow, and it was one of the most heat tolerant yellows that really can give you a unique color you don't get out of many trees.
And it's spring interest. It has that spring interest with the leaves where you have that yellow, but you get that red border around the leaves. It just looks really cool. And then you talk about this. This really is one that is a tank. I had a spot in my garden that I wanted that contrast that you talk about with that yellow, because that yellow makes everything else pop. It brightens up corners. It brightens up the garden. But I had a spot where I needed something that could be heat tolerant, sun tolerant. And from my personal experience, this thing is just a tank.
Now, in full sunlight, you will get more of that highlighter yellow color on Summer Gold. One of the unique things about this tree is you can actually use it in a more shaded situation to brighten up those darker spots in the garden. And we've got some examples of that at Maplewood Gardens, where our parents have it both in the sun and in the shade. And in the shade, you get a brighter yellow-green color that still stands out, especially in the shade, and it just glows, and you're attracted to it. And then you see it in the sun, and you get that highlighter yellow. And it's the same tree, two different locations, but it's such an easy tree to use in the garden because of that. Summer Gold, if you don't have one, get one today. MrMaple.com. We always try to keep this tree in stock.
Okay, we're getting into the top 10 here. So coming in at number 10, Moonrise.
Moonrise is an Acer Shirasalanum selection found by our good friend Carl Munn. And it is one of the most hardy and easy to grow of any of the Acer Shirasalanums. Now, that may not mean much to you, but this is a full moon Japanese maple. So it's got that round leaf. So it gives this very pleasing and elegant leaf shape. But the colors that this tree provides is some of the most outrageous. It looks like, Flamethrower, Cersei's Flamethrower is probably one of our more popular trees we offer on Mr. Maple, but this is those Flamethrower colors, but on a Japanese maple almost. You have pink-red colors that just pop out over lime green with this malting phase, and it's just continually popping color after color in the garden from the spring, the summer, and the fall colors can be really nice shades of yellow. Moonrise, easy to grow, extremely vigorous for Acer Shirasalanum, and is extremely hardy.
Yeah, you're looking about 8 to 10 foot in 15 years. And this was the 2016 Maple of the Year, and there's a reason why. If you've never seen one, you need to check them out, and there's a reason why it was the Maple of the Year in 2016. And if there's anyone out there and you're listening to this on the audio version, on the podcast, check us out on YouTube, because all of these that we're talking about will have pictures of all of these. and the fall color on this one. We're going to put this one up for sure, but you're going to get all your leaves are going to have a different color at the same time. But then this is also one that throughout its spring and summer, and then the summer flush going into fall, this is one of those that is a constant performer all season long.
My brother-in-law came to our spring open house, and we have open houses here at Mr. Maple. We have typically about 4 times a year, but 2 times are typically fairly consistent. One is Labor Day, which is coming up, and that's on the Labor Day Monday. But then we also have one on Memorial Day Monday. Almost every year, those 2 times are always consistent. And my brother-in-law came to our Memorial Day festival where we open up our doors, let everyone come shop. And he came and found Acer Shirasano Moonrise. He put one in his garden, and everybody, all the family members have been going crazy about it. And so now all the family members that come and visit his yard all come to me and they say, hey, when are you going to have some more Moonrise? Hey, you got any more Moonrise in stock? Because they all want the tree once they see it, because it just puts on a show like no other.
So coming in at number 9, we've got Germaine's Generation.
Oh my goodness. This is a really one of my favorite Japanese maples. It is a green, larger leaf, lace leaf with twist and contorts. And this thing gets out there and grows quickly. If you're a friend of the YouTube channel, and you've been following for a while, or you follow Mr. Maple on YouTube, you probably heard I had a 92-year-old lady, 91-year-old lady come visit the nursery, and she asked me for, a tree that made a big specimen quickly, because, she's like, I don't got long, I'm 92 years old, I want something I can enjoy. And so I showed her Germaine's Generation and some other plants, and then she told me, she said, I'm going to go with that Germaine's Generation. That sounds like it gets out there quick and makes a good tree, makes this nice weeping habit. Can you pick that up for me? And I was like, of course. I mean, and so I bent down. This 91-year-old lady pinched me on the butt. And I looked back at her, and she says, I still got it. And I'm like, oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness.
And then here the next year, when she was 91, then the next year we had a garden talk, and I was about to tell that joke because I was like, that's just memorable. It makes me laugh every time I think about Germaine's Generation. And the 91-year-old lady was in the crowd. It may have been 2 years later or something. So she was then like 92 or 93. And I was like, oh my goodness. Matt elbowed me. He's like, hey, don't tell that joke. She's in the crowd. But Germaine's Generation is one of those rock stars, easy to grow. And to me, it just gets out there. We planted a large 3-gallon in the garden at my parents' home. And, 10 years later, it looks like it's been there for 100 years. So you got to make sure you give some space to this. But that twist and contorted habit, that's why it gets its name. We fell in love with this tree at Bill and Kristen Taylor's down in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And they have a gorgeous specimen. And Bill has gotten in there and helped train and accentuate some of the twist and contorting habit. So he opens it up so you can actually see the branches that were twist and contorts naturally. And you just fall in love with that tree. You see that and you're like, that is a work of art. I think the story goes that a large nursery offered him something that was like $10,000 or $20,000 for that tree. And Bill said, I'd rather you drive a tractor trailer through my front porch than take that tree. Like it becomes part of your yard and something you fall in love with. Easy to grow though. I mean, that thing grows fast, vigorous, can handle a lot of sunlight.
Yeah, this one's named after Germaine Izelli, and also known as contorta, because of that movement and the way everything just shapes. And you're looking at about 10 by 15 in 20 years. So you're talking about something that gets up there real quick.
It may even be a little bigger. I think ours, and from the 3-gallon, has, it's been in a nurseryman's garden, but I mean, it's probably 18 foot wide in probably 15 years now. And It's funny because I've got a photo with my dad standing in front of the tree. And you go look at that tree today and you're like, that tree is like double, tripled in size. And my dad doesn't look any older. So it's like, that is crazy. Germaine's Generation, easy tree to grow. Matt calls it the Mack truck of Japanese maples. And if you're looking for a tree that's going to make a large specimen in your garden, that's going to make a bold statement, give it some room because it's going to get big. But if you've got the room, get yourself a Germaine's Generation, because it is a tree for a beginner that's easy to grow and makes a beautiful specimen.
Okay, coming in at number 8, we've got Twombly's Red Sentinel.
Yeah, Twombly's Red Sentinel. This tree is beautiful and it's extremely easy to use. Its utility is off the charts. Gives a flagpole a color in the garden.
Yeah, this is one that I really like. So when we have our open houses, and we'll get some beginners that come up and say, I'm looking for that traditional red color, but I want something that's going to be, that can tolerate my space. It's going to be in full sun, but it's going in a corner. So I always recommend Twombly's Red Sentinel. You get the traditional look, but it's going to be that columnar upright. Again, it's that tank. It can handle that full sun. You get those traditional colors. And I really like this one because it breaks the rules, because it's a sport. And most of the time when you think of sport, you don't think of an upright tree like that.
Yeah, you think about those dwarf sports, sometimes called witch's brooms. You think of something that's going to be round and ball-shaped. Ken Twombly actually told me he'd found this as a witch's broom mutation, and he put it out in his garden, and he'd grafted and put it out in his garden, and it grew tall and narrow, and that's how the name it got, Twombly's Red Sentinel. It looked like a sentinel standing out there. And it fits in a narrow footprint, but it gives you a lot of verticality, and it gives you some great color as well. Those cherry red colors in the spring gives you some awesome maroon colors during the summer, and the fall colors return to a fiery red color. For a tree that fits fairly narrow in a narrow space, Twombly's Red Sentinel can be used at the entranceways, can be used to give you that vertical interest we talked earlier about with the Sucasa silhouette. But it can be put up the corner of a house. It can be put up near a walkway, because it is one of the most narrow growing Japanese maples of any of the Japanese maples out there.
And again, this is one of those where we talked about, like with Kohime, you can use it as a shrub instead. This is one that you can also use like you would if you had a tall, upright arborvitae, that you could use this instead of that. And again, you're using it in a concept to border something, but then again, you're getting that fall color. You're getting that fall show that you wouldn't get from something else.
Yeah, Ken Twombly said in Connecticut, this is actually being used as a deciduous screen. So they're planting them, near each other, letting them kind of grow together. And you get the changes of the seasons that you get with Japanese maples. I mean, evergreens are nice. They give you some year-round interest. But the seasonal difference on many of these arborvitaes don't give you a dynamic display like Twombly's Red Sentinel can do. And you can enjoy and appreciate the changes of the seasons. And you can get that red color that people love with Japanese maples with Twombly's Red Sentinel. And, we actually were featured on Joe Lample's Grow in a Greener World. And Joe Lample, was like, hey, let's talk about some of your favorite trees that people should use in their garden. And Twombly's was one of those trees that we featured because the landscape, people's gardens, it's ever shrinking. And if you want something that gives you some red color, some people might not have room in their garden nowadays for a large red upright Japanese maple. But if they've got a small footprint, they can still enjoy the red color and a Japanese maple with Twombly's Red Sentinel.
Okay, let's keep this going along. Getting closer to that top 5. We got coming in at number 7, we've got Orangiola.
What do you like about Orangiola, Sean?
Orangiola, so I don't know if it was you or Matt that said this, but referred to it as the Baskin Robbins of Japanese maples. And that clicked in my mind because it has 31 flavors. And when I say 31 flavors, I mean, this thing puts on a show. You can look at this thing and you got different colors going on at the same time all throughout the season. It's not just spring. It's not just summer. It's not just fall. You've got so many different things going on at the same time.
I know Matt always claims that Baskin Robbins with all those different flavors, and you're right. I mean, this one puts on so many colors of red. It's just outrageous. You get some orange red on the outside. You get some maroon red right behind that. You get some mauve red behind that. You get some green red behind that. And then you keep having these colors that come across it. It's funny because when I describe that tree, because we used to go to garden shows all the time and load up trailers full of plants and take to garden shows and sell directly to the public. And when I would describe that colors and show people photos, people often decided, you know what? I like that color change. I'm going to go with this tree because it is so colorful. And it's very unusual and different than what people think of as a typical red weeping lace leaf. With Orangeola, you get this constant change where the tree is always changing. And in the springtime, you get this orange-red color. But then those color changes start coming in late spring. The summer, you get a lot of green with that orange-red new growth coming across it. Fall colors can be a bright orange-red. I know I've talked about a lot of different color changes throughout there, but that's what this tree is known for. It's always changing and is always beautiful. It used to be that everybody always came to us asking for a Crimson Queen. And Crimson Queen is a phenomenal red lace leaf that holds its color in the shade, but it has now been trumped by one of the most trees people come ask for in a lot of garden centers across America, by Orangeola. And it's because when people see this tree, they have to have it. When people put this in their garden, they really enjoy it. And when they move to a new house, if they had an Orangeola before, they've decided they have to have an Orangeola in their garden that they're just starting. And so it is a tree that people fall in love with. It was a Maple of the Year with the North American Maple Society as well. Easy tree to grow for beginners. Acer palmatum Orangeola.
And I like it because you say it's hardy. It might be one of the, it's heat tolerant, it's sun tolerant, and this might be one of the most cascading of the lace leaves. And so this past open house, the summer open house that we had in July, we had a couple that was, I want Orangeola. And I asked, okay, well, are you looking for a low graph or a high graph? Well, what's the difference? So I explained what the difference is and all that stuff. And I said, well, you know what? This is one where you can get a high graph and you can mass plant it with a low graph in front of it. And they were just like, I never even thought about doing anything like that. And that's something else I like about Orangeola, is that it is one that you can mass plant together with other Orangeolas to make even a bigger specimen.
And I've seen that done in a dramatic way. One of our customers is an artist, and she actually took Orangeolas and did a mass planting. And the unique thing about Orangeola is that, if you plant a lot of Tamukiyamas together, it can kind of grow and look like one massive Tamukiyama. Orangeolas, as you plant them together, create this mountainous effect that almost looks like a painting, because the way it's so strongly habit of weeping, it has these dips and valleys in between, and it makes this beautiful display that literally gives this appearance of these ever-changing colors on a mountain landscape. And, when you have an artist who's a gardener, you get to see unique things. And that was one of the most unique displays I've ever seen of Orangeola.
Okay, moving right along. We're coming in at number 6 with Shishi Gashira.
Y'all, this is one of the Japanese maples that's one of the very first Japanese maples ever listed in literature. So when people started producing Japanese maples, there's some literature from the 1700s. And the 1700s list has, a large number of Japanese maples already. There's already a lot of cultivars that have been cultivated for unique traits. Shishi Gashira fits in that original list. Shishi is a mythological lion in Japanese literature. It's often referred to as the lion's head, but more accurately, it'd be kind of like saying Minnie Mouse's head, because it's a specific lion in Japanese literature, and it's a female lion. And this is a classic, and it gives a unique texture with this really scrunched up leaf, this sort of regal habit because it's tight and dense, but it has a dark green color, and this tree is easy to grow. It's bulletproof. It's an easy tree for beginners.
This was my first Japanese maple I bought. The thing is a tank. I can put it in the shade. It grows well. I can put it in the sun. It grows well. I like that it has those almost kind of Makawa-like, the thick shingle-like, but you like leaves. But like I say, get that crinkling. And you can't underestimate the fall colors on this tree. The fall colors that it goes to, can start out, you get some of those oranges into the yellows. Just an absolutely amazing tree.
This is a Japanese maple that can actually give fall color in a container, which is quite a unique thing. Often fall color becomes more consistent with age as a tree, as a specimen, often found in the ground in the landscape. Shishi Gashira often gives a fairly consistent fall color in a container, which really impresses me because it just always gives this dynamic display. The thing that's most impressive about Shishi Gashira, I think, though, is that texture and that dark green color. The color is a darker green than most other plants. It stands out because of that color, but the texture this thing has with that crinkled leaf, it doesn't look sick. It looks unique, and you're drawn to it. And I think this is why it's often many collectors' favorite Japanese maple. And it becomes one of their favorite Japanese maples because they see a specimen in their garden that they've put out in the garden. It's continued to grow, and it gets more and more beautiful with age.
And with that age, if you get to see some of an older specimen, this is an upright tree. And what's really cool is when you see some of these bigger specimens out in people's gardens, those leaves still maintain those crinkle tight leaf structure on it. It doesn't change on it as the tree gets bigger, but the leaves still maintain that same exact crinkly, tight layered look.
It's funny because if you go to many, like the MrMaple Friends group on Facebook, there's often people who they find a large Shishi Gashira that's, 30, 40 years old, and they're taking photos with it, just talking about how beautiful and special it is, which is unusual because many times when you see a Japanese maple, you really appreciate those 6 to 8 foot Japanese maples. And then when you see a specimen of Shishi Gashira, it's just over the top. You're like, I've never seen anything this big. This is amazing. And a lot of people are always posting photos of Shishi Gashira, especially when they find those large specimens, because there's just something special about it. And it's kind of hard to always put into words, but if you see this tree in the garden, it makes a statement with its texture, its fall color, its dark green color. It's just that tight, dense habit. It's a Japanese maple that you need to have in your garden.
Okay, now we're getting into that top 5. So if you're out there on YouTube in that live chat, let us know what you think these top 5 are going to be. So here we go. Number 5, Fire Glow.
This is possibly one of the most amazing introductions by Fratelli Ghirardelli Nursery, which says a lot because Summer Gold, we talked about earlier, is also one of their selections. Fire Glow is an upright red Japanese maple, but it's a mid-sized upright red. And this tree is easy to grow and fits in many people's yards because of that. But the thing that makes Fire Glow special is its glowing effect. This is a red Japanese maple that gets an orange red to the backside of the leaves. So if you plant this tree with morning sun hitting it or afternoon sun hitting it, if you're looking up into the tree, you get a glowing red effect. This just makes an outrageous tree because you have this tree, you put it in the garden, you let it grow up to the specimen, and then you can really appreciate that glowing like effect that you can't get out of many other Japanese maples. And it's a glowing red. So, it's just going to captivate your garden and create this presence that is unlike many other, things that you can put out in your garden.
So you're looking at about a tree that's going to get about 10 to 12 foot in 15 years. And with Fire Glow, you can't underestimate, we didn't say anything about its fall color. And its fall color, if you're going to put anything up against Osaka Zuki for fall color, Fire Glow is going to be your tree.
Yeah, that is for sure. One of our friends in Canada allows us to use his photos of Osaka Zuki and Fire Glow, and they compete pretty hard, which is impressive because Fire Glow typically holds its red color long throughout the season. So it doesn't get as much chlorophyll to the leaves, but you can still get amazing fall color out of Fire Glow. If you're looking for a red upright Japanese maple and you don't have a lot of space, it's hard to beat it. It makes that mid-sized upright that most people want for their gardens, and it does that in that unique way. Many people, their first Japanese maple is either a Bloodgood upright or a Weeping Lace Leaf. I'm telling you, if you're going for a Bloodgood and you're looking for something that's red upright, that's at medium size, go with Fire Glow. It's going to give you that little extra oomph, that extra flair, and it's going to give you that red color you're looking for.
Okay, here we go. Number 4, Waterfall.
Now, Waterfall is a green lace leaf that was found at a New Jersey state park near a waterfall. And I say it was found, it was planted as a green lace leaf. It got the name waterfall on it because it had that weeping-like habit. And again, it was found at a waterfall. It was likely that original tree was Acer palmatum viridis. Waterfall has become a little more popular in the nursery trade because it's got its name, waterfall, which describes that dynamic, cascading, weeping habit. But as J.D. Veritrees says in his papers when we went back and looked at his research at Oregon State Archives, likely they're the exact same plant. Old specimens of this have some really strong hooking to them, same as viridis, and it's a green lace leaf that gives you some clear yellows to oranges in the fall.
Yeah, waterfall. I think what's great about this one, this is one that meets that heat tolerant list, so you know it's going to be tough. And you brought up the fall color. When we brought in those 10-gallon waterfalls, I think people didn't think much about it when they first came in. Oh, it's just a green lace leaf. But when we had the open house and people saw those waterfalls hit those fall colors, you talk about those oranges and all that stuff. When you actually see waterfall in its fall color, it is a showstopper.
Yeah, I like the green lace leaves quite a bit. And they're often underutilized. In Japanese gardening, the green is the predominant color because of the changes of the seasons, like we talked about with Osaka Zuki. But waterfall itself can give you something that we don't often get with those red lace leaf Japanese maples. Often when people go to plant a lace leaf, they go to plant it in front of their front door. And if you have a dark colored home, that dark colored red maroon Japanese maple can get lost. If you plant a waterfall in that exact same spot, gives you a lively feel, and there's a dynamic contrast between the colors of your Japanese maple and the background. And so often a waterfall is actually a better choice for those dark colored homes. Light colored homes, you can actually even get a more lively feel planted there as well. So there's a lot of usage for a waterfall Japanese maple in your garden.
Okay, so I'm thinking this next one, people are going to be surprised that it's here and not number one, but we're coming in at number 3 with Makawa Yatsubusa.
Yeah, it's one of our favorite Japanese maples here at MrMaple. I'm not going to lie. Makawa Yatsubusa is a dwarf layering Japanese maple. It's great for containers. It looks like a little miniature bonsai out in the landscape, and because of that, people often use seedlings of this tree or grafted selections of this tree for bonsai. Makawa Yatsubusa, it's just got this unique presence about it because of its texture and its larger leaves and its light green habit that quickly draws everyone's attention. It was the very first maple of the year with the North American Maple Society. For a dwarf Japanese maple, it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, you're looking about 4 to 5 foot in 15 years, so it's one that's going to stay condensed. And again, you said container. This one is probably my favorite one to use as a container tree because you can bring it up, and again, this is one that you can put it in the sun, you can put it in the shade, and you're going to do well with it. But as a container, you bring it up on the porch, and you can bring your garden to your sitting area. You get to sit amongst your trees, and that tight layering. It almost looks like a comic book character. It's just a fun tree overall, and it's hardy. It's a easy tree to grow.
If I was putting this in our popularity of our customers, it would be number 1. It's one of our top selling trees almost every year. But overall, across the United States, that's a different thing. And that's one of the reasons why we didn't put it at number 1 for this specific podcast, for this top 25 for beginners. It's an easy tree to grow. People always talk about how easy it is to grow in those hotter climates. They say, oh, well, if you're having trouble with that tree, try Makawa Yatsubusa. I was just seeing that in some of the gardening groups, and I was like, that's so true. Because this is an easy tree to grow, and it's one you fall in love with. The thing I like about Makawa Yatsubusa, too, is it doesn't have to be a massive specimen like the biggest Makawa in the world at Buckholz like we have. It can just be a small Makawa Yatsubusa, and you can appreciate it just the same because its unique structure, its habit. I mean, a 1 gallon could be your favorite tree in the garden. And that is one of the unique things about Makawa Yatsubusa is it makes a bold statement even as a small tree. And I think that's one of the reasons people love it because they can get a small tree and is very much appreciated even at a tiny size.
And that's a great point, because it's one of those that even at that small size, just its growth habit, it looks like it's a mature tree at that small size. And that's just, I mean, that's a trait that's just unbelievable for a tree.
Underrated on its fall color too, some nice oranges and reds. If you're starting out and you want something a little more on that collector side, this is an amazing tree for beginners. I mean, it's number 3 on our list. You know, we've got, if you don't know anything about Mr. Maple, we do over 1,000 varieties of Japanese maples. We're probably closer to that 1,500 list, 1,500 different varieties of Japanese maples that we've, you know, and who knows how many Japanese maples we've actually had here at Mr. Maple, because there's probably a few hundred more that we've just discontinued. So when it comes to Japanese maples, we do one of the largest selections in the United States, one of the largest selections in the world. And we're telling you, if you're looking for a Japanese maple, Makabe Atabusa coming at number 3 for beginners.
Okay, number 2, getting into number 2, Tamukiyama.
Now, Tamukiyama is a selection by Kobayashi Mumiji Nursery in Japan. The same nursery we talked about with Ryusin. Ryusin is a recent introduction. Tamukiyama, that's one that was introduced over 200 years ago. 28 generations of nurserymen later at Kobayashi Mumiji, they introduced Ryusin. It's just shocking that one of their introductions is from so old that they've got such a nursery that has such classic traditions that has been around in Japan for that long. That's just so impressive. Can't say enough about Kobayashi Mumiji, but Tamukiyama is a classic, and it's a good Japanese maple that's not been beaten yet. And it's hard to believe that something was introduced over 200 years ago that is still the best red lace leaf for beginners. The thing I like about Tamukiyama, one, it holds its color really well. So late in the summer, it's typically going to have that good red color with some sunlight. And then it leaves out 2 weeks later, so it avoids later threats of frost. So it can handle both the high heat areas, but it can also handle those areas like we have here in Western North Carolina, where you get those late frosts. Often when you get those late frosts, it's still not in leaf, or is in those early stages of leafing where it doesn't get damaged. So for a Japanese maple that's a red weeping lace leaf, often people's very first Japanese maple, Tamukiyama, it's one of the best.
And I think that's what makes this tree special, is what you talked about, it leafing out later. So you avoid that. We talk a lot about, especially now, heat tolerant, something for those high heat, all that stuff. This is one that you can say is cold tolerant. You can use those words. And I could say personally with this one, my in-laws were originally from Tennessee, and they had a lot of Japanese maples on their property. And then they relocated to Denver, Colorado. And they were plant people. They were garden people. And going to Colorado, that all changed to, we miss our Japanese maples, and Japanese maples don't grow here. So we sent a Tamukiyama to them. It's in a container, and they are just over the moon because they can winterize it. They can put it in an unheated garage during the winter. They know because it leaves out later, they're not going to have any issues with frost. They can keep it smaller in that container, and now they've got a Japanese maple in Colorado where you don't think, hey, you can have a Japanese maple, but they're successful with it, and now they're even saying, we want more.
And that's one of the things that's really impressive is Denver, Colorado is at a higher altitude, and that means you have those frosts at later dates. You can use Tamukiyama at those higher altitudes, but it's also a tree that can handle more sun in hot climates. So it fits all across the spectrum, and it holds its color, one of the best of any of the Japanese maples. If you're looking for a weeping red lace leaf Japanese maple and you're a beginner, Tamukiyama, it's one of the best. So we've made it all the way down from 25, and now we're down to number 1 on the top Japanese maples for beginners. This is a list that we compiled from Japanese maples that can grow in zones 5 through 9 in your hardiness zones, and are Japanese maples that are easy to grow. They have great utility in your gardens, and they're going to be extremely beautiful. Guys, if you're watching this on YouTube, give us some ideas in the comments what you think our number 1 Japanese maple for beginners is. Coming in at number 1, we've got Acer palmatum, Emperor 1, also known as Red Emperor.
Oh, so Emperor 1. Again, this is that's a tank. Take the heats. This is an upright. Mid-size, you're looking at about 15 foot. This is just, but what makes this, why is this number 1 on the list for beginners? Because this is one that's a tank. I've talked about in the past on some videos that, sometimes I can be guilty of lazy gardening, where I want something I know I can put in the ground and I'm not going to have to obsess on taking care of. This is one of those you can put in the ground, let nature do its thing, and you're going to be successful.
Yeah, you want to make sure you give it good drainage. But what Emperor 1 does is it gives you a red, upright Japanese maple that leaves out 2 weeks later, avoids later threats of frost like Tamukiyama does. It's heat tolerant, and it holds its color extremely well. So it's everything that you're looking for in a red Japanese maple. And in that 15-foot size, it's one of that medium to larger size red uprights that is durable in a lot of people's garden. Often a Bloodgood is someone's very first Japanese maple, and that's perfectly fine. We carry Bloodgood at MrMaple. It's a beautiful tree with amazing fall color, but Emperor 1 is an easy tree for beginners. And that's why it came here at number 1, because it is beautiful, it's hardy, and its utility is off the charts. Everybody's looking for that red color in their garden, and Emperor 1 or Red Emperor does that in an immaculate way. This is a selection by Dick Wolf of Red Maple Nurseries. And to give you an idea what a selection process looks through to introduce a tree, he went through over almost 200,000 red Japanese maple seedlings to select the very best one. This one was originally known as the Cassidy tree because it was his working code name, and he went through and evaluated a lot of other trees to figure out what is the best red upright Japanese maples for people's garden. It's a lot of work to go through that evaluation process. We've done that with Hot Blonde and Dragon Master and Red Panda. People don't realize how many trees did not make the cut. And then he went through all these red seedling Japanese maples and said, this one here, this one's my champ. This one's the best introduction from Red Maple Nurseries. It's Emperor 1.
So guys, let us know in the comments if there's something you think we missed for beginners. Let us know what you have in your garden, what tree you have in your garden that is a beast, is a killer, that's hardy. If you think we missed it on our list, because this is for those beginners, because there's a lot of you out there that watch these podcasts on YouTube or listen to them on Spotify or whatever you stream on that have experience with these. But is there something you think we missed? Let us know in those comments.
And if you're a beginner Japanese maple, check us out on MrMaple.com. We do the largest selection of Japanese maples, mail order directly to your door anywhere in the United States. And, even if you're not in the United States, find us on YouTube, the MrMaple Show. Subscribe to us there. We put out daily content about Japanese maples, so you can learn how to care for Japanese maples. You can get cultivar highlights and breakdowns, and get a lot of the knowledge that you need to really have your Japanese maples thrive in your garden. And if you like this top 25 maple list, remember on MrMaple.com, we've added 10 new trees every single Tuesday and Thursday, because I know once you get some of these trees on this top 25 list and you start growing Japanese maples, you're going to have success and you're going to want more. So check us out on MrMaple.com. We'd really appreciate it.
And we appreciate you guys tuning in and checking out our list. Until next time, take care.
God bless.
And have a great day.